Back when I was applying to law school, I was a so-called splitter applicant. Not by choice, of course, but because I had a low GPA, and so I knew I would have to make up for it with a higher LSAT score. And that motivation fueled me to get a 175 on LSAT test today. So today, I'm going to walk you through how specifically splitters should prep for the LSAT and apply to law school so that if you are a splitter 2, you can get an LSAT score that more than makes up for a low GPA. So just to define terms here, splitters are those who have a relatively lower GPA and a higher LSAT score. In contrast, a reverse splitter is someone who has a low LSAT score and a high GPA. Now, when you are thinking about applying to law school, typically your GPA is relatively fixed at this point. You're probably a junior or a senior in college at least, and so you're only going to be able to make marginal impacts on your GPA with any single individual college class. However, strangely enough, your LSAT score weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined, and it can be the result of a single day of, say, 2.5 hours or so. What this means is that in law school admissions, your LSAT score is the biggest factor. It's the number one factor. Then secondly is your GPA. And then everything else, your so-called soft factors, are a distant third. This would include your application essays, your recommendation letters, your resume, if you do an interview, any demonstrations of interest, if you tour the school, if you do a Zoom interview with admissions, for example. Those things are all nice to do, and of course you should do them. You should never miss an opportunity to share something about yourself with admissions, but the process, to be frank, is largely numbers driven. They might claim it's holistic, but if you look at their incentives and you look at what they do, it comes down to primarily the numbers. And so you want to focus on, at this point, most likely getting the highest LSAT score possible. Now, coming up, we have the January LSAT and the February LSAT, then April, June, and beyond. January and February are the latest LSAT test dates I would recommend if you're applying to law school this cycle. If you're thinking that you need to do April or June or beyond, I would recommend instead applying to law school at the beginning of the cycle in the fall. Now, I typically recommend spending a minimum of 2 to 3 months studying for the LSAT, and ideally 5 to 6 months in order to reach your fullest potential on the test, given the relative importance of the LSAT in the law school admissions process. Meaning that if you are looking at January or February as your target LSAT test dates, and you really want to apply to law school this cycle, ideally you've already gotten started with your LSAT prep, or at least you're able to study for the LSAT close to full time, if not, to give it your all to get the highest LSAT score possible. If you have a longer time frame, that's even better. You could go for April or June and give yourself the opportunity to reach your fullest potential on the LSAT and apply at the beginning of the cycle in the fall. Now, regardless of when you're taking the LSAT, I recommend placing your LSAT prep into 3 major buckets that you conquer sequentially. You have accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling LSAT questions by question stem type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each question, meaning you want to be clear on what is a necessary assumption versus a sufficient assumption. For example, you want to know how to tackle a strengthening question versus a weakening question versus a parallel question. And you want to be crystal clear on the 3 most common types of logical reasoning questions: necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. Once you are at a reasonable degree of accuracy, say roughly 70% accuracy, you then want to move on to pacing, doing individual timed sections to better determine how to allocate your time over the course of the section. And then you want to pull it all together with full-length timed practice tests. Ideally, you'll be able to do at least 10 of those before LSAT test day, so that test day itself will be like just another run-through. Now, let's look at how to balance LSAT prep versus your undergraduate GPA if you are still in school. Ideally, the period over which you are studying for the LSAT, if you're still in college, your class load's a little bit lighter. Maybe if you're taking the LSAT in January, for example, you're able to go hard at the LSAT over winter break without having to worry about school at all. If you are working or you have family obligations, hopefully you can lighten the load just a little bit to make the LSAT more of a focus in the short term, given its relative importance in the process. and then hopefully you can catch up on your classwork if you're in school or your other obligations after the LSAT and make the LSAT more of a focus, at least in the short term. And if you would like my help, my team and I would be glad to support you. We offer live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and one-on-one coaching. You can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.